let's look at the different types of payloads and again, the more options inside our Metasploit framework. Now, Metasploit is such a behemoth of it's a big area, a lot of different modules, payloads, exploits, and it's just really becoming familiar with what you want to use, right? Now, there's no right or wrong if you prefer Metasploit or if you like Covenant or Silent Trinity or any other sort of exploitation module. It's just becoming familiar with that framework and how to use it, right? And people love different sort of tool sets, right? I've got people that enjoy using Metasploit framework. I have friends that use Covenant. I've used Covenant. I enjoy using Covenant as well. It's a nice GUI interface, runs on the .NET framework. You know, these are different types of exploitation frameworks that we can use to support our engagement goals. So let's jump in now and look at the different types of payloads, how we work with those payloads, the different options that are available, and navigating around the Metasploit framework. So let's just do a quick search. And I think as well, before we do that search, let's just do a quick MSF update as well. So sometimes MSFD update, MSFD update. And this will just make sure in case that you haven't done an update through your home machine or your Kali Linux machine, just make sure that we get the current information as much as we can through the Metasploit framework. So just again, if in case we're searching something, it may be outdated, there may be new payloads, new exploits, new auxiliary modules. So the database has been updated. If I just do a quick banner again, and we're back here again. So that's okay. So let me just see if there's been any changes. So we've got 2294 exploits, 1201. So it looks kind of, yeah, looks all current. So that's okay. So just clear the screen. All right, so let's just see where we are. So let's begin doing some sort of searching, right? So we know that the host that we're going to attack is susceptible to EternalBlue. So we've used that in a previous video. We can do again another Nmap scan. So if I just do a database Nmap, and then I can do a quick script, use the SMB vuln script, and we can point it to that host. We can then start to dissect and understand maybe this host is susceptible to some sort of attacks, right? So at this point, let's just say that we know that it's susceptible to EternalBlue. It's susceptible to our SMB vuln MS17 TAC 010. So let's take that information, let's go search, and let's go now exploit this host. So, all right, so what do we do now? So let's just go do a search for EternalBlue. And let's see what comes up. So we've got 4 different options, or if you want to count the 0, 5 different options here, or 4 down here that it's saying. We can go now into these modules and basically use these exploits, use the modules, and obviously load the options up and then go through these parameters. So if we don't want to use associated modules or associated exploits that we run, well, then that's okay. We can change these as well. So let's go away and use this first one. So I'm just going to say use, again, we can use the number reference here, or we can use the actual name. So if you want to go use exploit /windows/SMB, yada, 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 we can go away and use that. Nice and easy way, just use 0 or reference the actual module number here that we can use. So let's go use that. And now it's saying, hey, no payload has been configured defaulting to Windows 64 interpreter /TCP, and that's okay, right? So we can change that, and then we can go into the options. So we can just do an options, and then it's telling us, well, to run this exploit, well, you're going to need a few things, right? If I just scroll up a little bit, it's saying, well, here's your exploit module, and here are the requirements. So you need to put in some stuff here. So what are the required fields? Well, you can go through these, right? It's telling us, well, if we need different information, if we've got a username and password for SMB, in most cases, when we're doing proof S or other types of post exploitation, some of these requirements are required. So you're going to have to be mindful if we're going to need a username and password. In this exploit right now, we don't need that, and that's okay, but it does require our remote host. So we're going to have to put in the remote host of the target that we're attacking. And then down here is our payload option. So the payload that we're going to deliver to that host, and it's already gone away and configured based on the information that we've either already used previously, and it's taken a standard local port as well of 444. So this is our IP address of our Kali box, and this is the port that we're going to connect into. So let's do a couple of things. Let's just do a quick show payloads, and let's see what payloads are available to us or compatible with the exploit that we're running. So let's do a quick payloads. And there's 72 payloads that can run and are pretty much compatible with this exploit. So that's a lot. Now, why would we want to use, or why would we use one exploit over another? Why would we use HTTPS or HTTP, or why would we use this reverse, process injection reverse TCP with RC4? So if we're using some sort of, if they're using, it's going to go through basically the encryption RC4 and basically create that reverse shell through that. So why are we going to use these different types of process injection files and different sort of payload options that are available to us? And kind of all falls down to the environment, right? So chances are, if we're being realistic enough, in most environments, there's going to be some sort of firewall or filter or network device that's going to be scanning the environment, right? Some sort of content filtering, network filters, device filters on the target. So the target, again, that we're targeting in our lab environment doesn't have EDR, doesn't have an appliance on it that's filtering out potential attacks, right? So we would use these because chances are when we're doing these reverse shells and these sessions that we're going to pop on these hosts, that traffic is coming back to us through the firewall, right? So the firewall itself is obviously going to be doing inspection, and at times it's going to be blocking those known ports. So the port that we got here that it's configured to, most times, it may work. There's a 50% chance that it will work if we use 444, if we use Elite, which is, 1337, which is a common one that we're going to use. These ports are kind of blocked on the firewall. If they're known seasoned security professionals and they're doing quite aggressive adversarial sims, then they'll know to block these common ports. But what's not going to be blocked is your port 80 or your port 53 for DNS or your port 443. These are common network services that are open. So again, they're not going to block HTTPS traffic because then you're going to be denying traffic to your staff. So we can use those protocols to then bind the sessions to that shell. And then as the traffic comes back to us, then we can come out of that port. So again, it kind of, instead of making up those ports like 442 or, 4422 or 444, like we've been doing before in previous demo instances, then we can use 80, 443, 53 to then basically bypass the content filtering or the filtering as such on those devices. So there's a bunch of different payloads that are available to us, as you've seen, like the 72 or 73 here that we've got, 72 payloads. There's process injections, where you're kind of injecting DLLs into running processes. So it lives inside that process of that running host, which is great because if the process is running already, well, then we could just slide into that process and then we could just have our shell bind to that actual process. So Meterpreter will run directly in that process, which is great. Then there's different things like PowerShell ones, there's generic shells, different load options, a boatload of different sort of services and payloads that are available to us, right? So let's just say that we want to use a specific payload. Now we can change the payload that we're using. So if we're using this reverse TCP one, well, if we don't want to use that, well, we can change that as well. And we can do that with a couple of ways. And a way to do that is, well, if it's, and I just got lost at the screen. Just my mouse wasn't working. So I'm like, why isn't it working? We can change the parameter on obviously the host number here. So we can use the entire description here, or if we're going to use the actual number here, we can use that as well. So we can say use 2, and that's going to now use this shell instead of the default one that it loads up to, which was our reverse underscore TCP one. So again, you can go in and customize this to your liking, depending on what we want to deliver. So let's use the Meterpreter one that's already loaded. We've already gone through the options, so we've kind of gone through it already. And let's set up as well the remote host. So let's just do quick options and let's just see what we need here. So again, we don't need any requirements. We just have to set up this remote host. We've got the local port information on the other host as well. And let's do that. So let's just do a quick set our host, and the remote host in this instance is 146 for me. So I'm going to do that and do a quick options. And there we go. So it's added the host here. The remote port is 445 for SMB. We don't need the SMB domain. We don't need a username and password. That's okay. And then if I look at the payload itself, so we're using this Windows x64 Meterpreter reverse TCP payload, and then there's the functions and requirements here. So this is our IP address here and the local port that we're going to use, which is all looking great. So just for demo's sake as well, I'm just going to copy this Windows x64, and I'm just going to go back to show payloads. And say that, for example, we do want to change a payload for whatever reason, right? Let's just say we want to go use this VNC inject, which I assume is going to leverage VNC, and it's going to give us a reverse shell through VNC. If we want to change it, well, then we can do a quick set payload. Go set payload. And we can just give the actual name itself. So we can use the entire name, or I can use this reference number here, 68. So I'm just going to type in 68. And there we go. So now it's changed. There's our new payload that we're going to use. And if I hit an options, it's going to give us some parameters here. So here's our initial exploit, which is our initial module. So that stayed the same. And then our payload down here as well. So it's saying, hey, you also may need additional information if we need to read through it. But we're not going to use this one in this example because we don't know if VNC is running on this host. If it is, maybe we want to use it through VNC as a proxy. So that could be one thing. So I'm just going to go back to use the initial one that was loaded. That's fine enough. So I'm just going to go use payload and then just make sure that's loaded up correctly. And it has, and now it's also removed our initial one. So I'm just going to go back and let's do a quick search for EternalBlue. It's got these two again. So let me just do a quick MSFT update. I shouldn't need to add the space there unless it's a space, but let's just have a quick look. Search EternalBlue. Okay. That's okay. So let's just use this again. So use 0. It's configured with our payload, which is the old payload. So quick options. Set payload. All right, cool. So now it's using the other payload. So our initial payload. So again, if we can change it, we're going to set payload, and we can set payload to whatever other compatible payload that we want to use, and then make sure it's associated with our initial payload or initial executable in this case, which is our EternalBlue exploit. So we can go away now and actually potentially run this against the host. So remote host has been configured, port 445 has been enabled there, and then our information here. So that's all looking good for now. So hopefully now we should be all good to go. And let's try it running it on the host. So if it all goes well, we should, saying, hey, it's looking likely. There may be a few things that go wrong with our shells, and that's okay. We'll troubleshoot if anything happens, but that's something that we just have to be familiar with, right? Sometimes the shell will open up, sometimes it will close instantly, and we just have to troubleshoot why it's either not working correctly. So at this point, we've got an exploit. So the exploit was successful with some nice little ASCII art here saying, hey, for the win. And that's great because we did exploit this host and it was successful. So at this point, we've got access to this host and we can do a get UID. It's saying, hey, your NT authority system. Well, let's do sysinfo. Tell me some more information on the system itself. So it's Vagrant 2008 R2 server. It's a Windows 2008 R2 server. Here's the information, service pack 1, so we can investigate what services are running potentially with that service pack 1. The architecture is x64, the work group details here, and so on and so forth. So logged in users is 2 users, and some more information here. And now we're going to go into using Meterpreter as well in the next video. So that's how we can obviously look at the processes to load the exploit, load the payloads, view the payloads as well that are compatible to run with that certain exploit. So that's how we sort of go around and obviously get our shell as well. So sometimes shells don't work well, and that's okay. They drop. There may be inconsistency. They may flutter. So there's ways to, we have to troubleshoot, and that's part of the process as well of us to try again, right? So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It was a quick down and dirty using EternalBlue to compromise the host. In an upcoming video, we're going to look at Meterpreter. We're going to look at managing sessions as well and do some funky stuff within Meterpreter shell. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and I'd love to see you in an upcoming video. Bye for now.